welcome back to the Miraculous Mamas podcast. I'm your host, Elizabeth Joy, and we believe in empowering people through storytelling and education. And I'm excited about today's guest. We have on Kaitlyn Wozniak, and I just enjoy talking to her because we have so much in common. She's a fellow doula. She struggled with an eating disorder before. She just had her second kid. And I know that we don't talk tons about the doula work on here, so I thought it would be fun to have her on to talk about all these different things, but also the work that she's doing with women to help them in their pregnancy and postpartum journey. And also to touch on how, like, even as doulas, like, birth doesn't always go as you expect. And so she's going to share her story with us. And I'm just so grateful for her coming on and just being so open, because nothing is one size fits all. And there's so much room in birth for you to, yes, make your plan, but also to be educated on all your options, and then also to follow your intuition. And we kind of touch on all of that in this episode. So I'm super excited to talk to her. If you missed last week, it was a really cool episode with Amy Van Haren, and she invented the pump spotting app. And it's cool because you can, like, be somewhere and rate a place based on, like, how nursing or pumping friendly it is. And you can leave tips for people if they're traveling, like, oh, I went to this one place and they actually have, like, a breastfeeding room, or, you know, if you're at this airport, between this gate and that gate is, like, a good place to go. And on top of that, just a whole community with a lactation consultant, people in similar journeys with you. And you can set dates on there, which I think that this is such a cool idea. So let's say you're planning on breastfeeding and you're due soon. You can put that date in there and you'll get tips and information regarding, like, that stage. Or let's say you're planning on weaning. Let's say you want to wean by the first birthday, and you can enter that date, or you're going to get love notes and tips and encouragement for that part of your journey, which I thought was so cool because it's often not talked about. And Amy's just done, like, such an amazing thing with that app. So it's really cool that, that she's that she's created the community that she has. So definitely check that out. Next week, we're having on Irene, and it's going to be an episode all about sex. So next week, maybe if you listen with your kids around, maybe don't. There's a couple times that I just get, like, real in there about some stuff. So I'm not sure if you want your children listening. And then after that week, we're having on Dr. Mona, and you guys know her as Peds.Talk, and she is just awesome. I ask all of my new mom pediatrician questions, and she gives so many great insights and tips, and I've loved following her on Instagram, and now, like, being able to interview her and talk to her as well. So I'm excited for you guys to hear from her. All right, we are going to go ahead and dive into this week's episode. All right, everyone, I'm excited about today's episode because I'm interviewing another doula. And I know you guys all know that I'm a doula, but I don't get to talk about my work that much on here. And so I'm excited to have Kaitlyn on today. Kaitlyn Wozniak, she just had a baby. She is 7 weeks postpartum, which is awesome that she's taking the time to do this interview and to join us. And she is known as the Fit Doula. She does pre- and postnatal training, labor prep, birth doula, and a childbirth educator. So she has a lot going on. She's busy. And I saw, like, on your Instagram, you're, like, taking on clients. I'm like, wow, this lady's, like, so motivated. I know, like, after I had Jovi and I had to go back to work, I was like, I'm not there yet mentally. So thanks for coming on the podcast, Kaitlyn, and I'm excited to chat with you today.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here. I've been listening to you for a long time now.
Oh, fun. Yeah. So I'd love to talk, how did you get into birth work? And how did you become, like, the Fit Doula, all of that?
So my long story made as short as possible. I got into fitness actually while recovering from an eating disorder. And I was really reframing my relationship with movement. And I started indoor cycling at a place that kind of removed numbers and metrics from the fitness experience, and at the same time was studying psychology. And after I graduated and was working in psychology for a while, I realized that there was a really big need to blend mindfulness and body image work and healthy wellness with the fitness industry. And so when I got involved in fitness, I started training specifically women and women that I could relate to on like the body image topic, and helping women form a deeper and more meaningful connection to fitness and food and their bodies. And that naturally just kind of spiraled into training pre and postnatal. Oddly enough, I was really interested in pre and postnatal, but I didn't have the lived experience of being pregnant yet. But I took the plunge and got my advanced pre and postnatal certification. When I signed up, I found out 3 days later I was pregnant with my son, and it just felt very serendipitous. And it was actually my clients who really encouraged me in 2020 to become certified as a birth doula. And it was really cool having their support, women who were expecting or on the other side and in postpartum, who we were kind of undoing a lot of the physical trauma together. It really just kind of like showing me that there was a really big need to blend the physicality of childbirth, and as well as like the education of childbirth, and bring them together for a really holistic experience.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing. All right. We are going to take a break from this episode. I know I have shared on here before about gut issues and different things that I have dealt with and had to kind of dig on my own to try to find solutions for different things, which is why I love companies like Everlywell, because they make these tests available to you so that you can get the information that you need about your body. And it can take some of that guesswork out of it. Like, should I eliminate this food? Maybe I'll feel better. Maybe that food. You can just take a food sensitivity test and find out which ones may be affecting you. In their at-home lab tests, they give you physician-reviewed results, personalized insights so you can take action on your health and wellness, and the at-home affordability and transparent cost. There's over 30 different tests on their website that you can choose from, including the food sensitivity, which is very popular, the metabolism, sleep and stress, thyroid, which checking your thyroid, I know some places do it in pregnancy, but it's really important to check it postpartum as well to make sure that it's getting the levels that you need. Because our bodies go through so many crazy hormonal changes, being pregnant, postpartum, everything. And they ship the test to your home and everything that you need for it with really simple instructions. And then you use the prepaid shipping label and mail your test back to a certified lab. And then in just days, your physician-reviewed results and actionable insights are sent to your device, and you can share the results with your primary care physician to help you figure out the next steps. Over 1 million people have trusted Everlywell with their at-home lab testing. Like I said, I love them. I've used them before for food sensitivities a couple of different times because they can actually change too. What I'm kind of sensitive to now is different than what I was sensitive to 3 years ago when I first tested. So I just kind of like having that knowledge and insight on my body. And then after I have this next baby, I'll probably do the thyroid test just to make sure everything's in check there as well. And for listeners of the show, Everlywell is offering a special discount of 20% off an at-home test when you go to everlywell.com/mamas. That's everlywell.com/mamas for 20% off your at-home lab test. everlywell.com/mamas. Now back to the episode. Obviously I love birth work. I've been in it for a while. And I can relate to the eating disorder part. And although I had found healing, like one of the ways in my healing was also like getting rid of, like, I didn't weigh myself for a couple of years. And when I got pregnant, so I had found like healing and found haven't dealt with it in a really long time. Just the intrusive thoughts and things like that. And then when I got pregnant and I was stepping on the scale, seeing numbers I had never seen before, I was like, holy crap, like this is tough. And how everybody gains weight different differently in pregnancy, and how we know, like in the birth world, that it's not this, you're gaining a pound a week and you gain between these two markers. Like everybody's body is different. And my journey with my daughter has looked a lot the same with this one. Like I gained 30 pounds by 30 weeks. And then like at my last appointment, I hadn't been there in a month because I did one virtually in between, and I hadn't gained anything. But your body, but I'm eating healthy. I'm doing the right things, you know, like, but it's so different for every person, but that can be a super triggering time. And then postpartum, it was like, holy crap. Like I didn't fall back into old patterns, but like, it was very hard to love my body.
Yes. Yeah. I totally relate. I feel like with my first, it was a lot easier. I felt like my job at the time lent itself to being really active in postpartum and even throughout my pregnancy. So it was like this built in, and looking back now, I feel like I kind of had, not the most realistic postpartum experience with my first, because I didn't have a choice but to go back to work, and I was teaching group fitness a lot. And so it was just like almost like an unhealthy like recovery process for me. And so I didn't, of course, like my body felt new and different, but I feel like my body morphed a little bit quicker in postpartum. This time around, my body morphed way quicker in pregnancy and postpartum. Like I'm more sedentary with COVID. I'm not in a group fitness setting. I sit while I train my clients virtually, which is new for a lot of us in the fitness world. So yeah, emotionally and physically, it's a very different experience with this one. And so even to your point, like person to person, our pregnancies can be very different. And not just woman to woman.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It is such like a triggering time though, but I love how you kind of bring this holistic approach, and especially having that background, that you understand that, because it's something that a lot of women struggle with, but don't talk about or haven't talked about. And there's so much of like the bounce back culture that makes you feel like your postpartum body isn't worthy. Because I know for me, it took me, and I don't weigh myself very often, but I think I was about 9 months postpartum when I was close to like my pre-baby weight. But even then there was things that were looser in different areas, and just things weren't the same. And I wasn't really worried about the number. And I'm not going to be this time, but just trying to appreciate your body, let yourself heal and recover, and then move in a way that's healthy and that feels good.
Well, and I think this is important to add too, because I don't know many women who know this fact, but as long as we're nursing or pumping, breastfeeding in any way, like our bodies are still producing hormones like relaxin that are going to keep our bodies from kind of, our hips spread a lot in pregnancy. There's a lot of things that become loose for good reason to deliver a baby. And that hormone's still rapidly being produced in the body as long as we are nourishing our babies through our breast milk somehow. So there is this unnecessary pressure to bounce back, but there's also this like insane pressure to breastfeed in some capacity. And so the two are combating each other all the time. And we are not really telling women like your body isn't being given a complete and fair chance to recover the way that we expect it to, because we're also upholding the standard of nourishing our babies. And many women don't know the hormonal responses from our bodies. And that's a big thing. I'm sure I'd be interesting to hear your thoughts on this, but I always say one of the things that really fuels my passion for this work is that so often women are thrust into pregnancy and childbirth and postpartum and just given lists of things that they can and can't do. And no one's really looping them into this conversation, explaining the why, explaining the how, letting them be an active participant in the process. And again, pregnancy can make us feel really out of touch with our bodies in a lot of ways. And so just like bringing some autonomy back to the experience for women is really important to me.
Mm-hmm. It's very important. I feel like I completely agree with everything you said, like just kind of being left out of the conversation. It's like, okay, here's you're pregnant. Here's like a first trimester packet, or here's like the do's and don'ts. And then that's like it. But even I feel like knowing the hows and the different things, because I was a doula before I got pregnant for several years. And I think having my daughter definitely opened up that experience, because I experienced things like I found myself Googling things that like, I know, I'm like, I know what I would tell my client right now, but I need, like, how come I'm like, wait, what is this? So true. Yeah. And even this morning I woke up and I looked in the mirror, or maybe it was last night, I don't remember, but I'm like, I glanced in the mirror and I feel like my belly is so huge right now. And I was realizing that I know that I'm pregnant, but like, I don't recognize myself. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't recognize my body. I think pregnancy is beautiful. Like, I love it for other people. I've had pretty good pregnancies. I haven't like had anything awful. I've had a lot of, back and sciatica issues this time, but there's like, I feel like also kind of being like room for creating space for women to feel how they're going to feel during the experience too is hard, because postpartum, I didn't feel like I connected with my daughter until she was like 3 months old. Yeah. I'm like, I love you. I don't know you. Like, I'm not sleeping and I'm, like caring for this new life. And it wasn't until like she was 3 to 4 months that I started to really feel like a connection to her. Yeah.
I definitely relate to that more with this one, with Betty, with my second. With Reese, I felt like it just in comparison, I didn't have anything to compare it to with him, but like, now that I look back, like I feel like I bonded a little bit quicker with him. And then with Betty, it has been a little bit harder. Like my focus is shifted to so many different things. I mean, I run a business this time around too. So I had to start working a week postpartum, I'm so grateful for, if there's anything positive that came out of this pandemic, it's our ability to work virtually. And I have access to women who are so understanding and compassionate, and a community of women who are mothers, who, it allows me to bring my baby with me to work and just like in the crook of my arm while I'm training people on Zoom or FaceTime or whatever. But my time isn't really, it's not undivided attention on her, which, that's another thing that I think we've have to make big strides on, is acknowledging that postpartum recovery looks so different for the modern woman. Mm-hmm. A lot of us are either entrepreneurs, or we are single parents and we have to go back to work sooner, or maybe, we don't have paid maternity leave. Maybe we have multiple toddlers running around and you have no choice but to be active, and you can't just lay up in bed drinking hot tea and stew all day. It's on the physical side of my job, I as someone who can relate, but also a professional who wants my clients to be safe and healthy, I think it's important to remember that the modern mother has a different layer of expectation, and it's not all about bonding with baby, as sad as that is. It's filled with a lot of other responsibilities and expectations. So I definitely relate to that.
Mm-hmm. We're going to take a quick break from this episode so I can share with you an app that has saved me money. Do you know why free trials renew without your consent? Because it's a scam. Don't let greedy corporations pocket your money. Download Truebill and take control of your subscriptions. Truebill is the new app that helps you identify and stop paying for subscriptions that you don't need, want, or simply forgot about. On average, people can save up to $720 a year with Truebill. That's so much. And you might be thinking, I would notice if there's like a monthly payment for something coming out of my account. But it's so much more than that. Like, I totally forgot about this magazine subscription that I had signed up for. It was like some add-on when I was checking out somewhere, and it was like $1 for the year. Well, after that, I got charged $80 the next year and the next year, but it was like a one-time annual fee thing that was coming out that I didn't even realize. I don't know why I thought in my mind that I was getting the travel magazine for free. But yeah, Truebill helped me identify that and stop it, because I thought it'd be cool to have these travel magazines and that I would look through them. I can tell you I looked through one and then never again. So I was just getting these weekly magazines that I was paying for, but not even looking at and not even realizing that I was paying for. So sign up for Truebill, and your concierge there is going to help you cancel unwanted subscriptions so that you don't have to. You don't have to deal with these businesses at all. Truebill has over 2 million users and has helped them save over $100 million. So don't fall for the subscription scams. Start canceling today at truebill.com/mamas. Go right now, truebill.com/mamas, and it could save you thousands a year. Truebill.com/mamas. So I'd love to talk about your doula work, and maybe some of the misconceptions that you get surrounding it, and just kind of what it looks like to work with you.
Yeah. I have so many doulas that I admire and consume their content on Instagram. I still feel like every single day, every single client, every single birth, I'm still learning so much. And I think I had a mentor once when I first became a personal trainer who told me, like, the only way you can fail this job is if you stop being hungry to learn more. And that has always stuck with me, and it's held true to this job as well. None of us have every answer, and we're always just kind of like I think it's really important that we all keep an open mind and like learn from one another. I would say that, like, what it's like working with me, I try to bring a level of athleticism to every client, and treating birth like an athletic feat. I always tell my clients, I'm going to teach you how to push like an athlete, not like you're pooping.
Because that's what they tell you at the hospital. Yeah. Like, for those listening, or if you've had a baby, they'll say, okay, bear down like you're having a bowel movement.
Yeah. And I'm like, okay, so that's actually, it's interesting. Like, before I became a doula, I was helping a lot of my clients navigate healing from prolapse, incontinence, other pelvic floor traumas. And I realized that so many of them were being taught this way, right? And they were having these really traumatic pushing experiences and major tears and so on and so forth. And so I was like, why aren't we teaching women to utilize these muscles, these beautiful core muscles that surround the uterus? And like, if we really think about how birth works and what a contraction is, and like how these muscles can aid that and expedite it, and stop teaching women to be chronically tense. And I think that's where like the body image and eating disorder recovery stuff comes in too, because we all know women who struggle with those things. And I see how, as women, we're always taught to like tuck it in and like stay really tense and tighten our midsections, and that feeds into our pelvic floor. We're also taught that like our pelvic floor should always be tight, and our pelvic floor doesn't push a baby out, right? So working with me really looks like a lot of education in your anatomy, helping women become more in tune with their bodies, and in that, like, I've found so much of a more meaningful and deeper connection with my body, a deeper appreciation for what it is, because now I understand it way better than I did when I was 16 or 22. And so I try, without going on a tangent, I try to go along with for like an educational journey with my clients, but looping in an athleticism, teaching women that like you are preparing your body for end stage of pregnancy, which is really physically taxing, childbirth, which is physically taxing, and postpartum as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's awesome. And that, I mean, I'm glad you touched on the pelvic floor because again, like you just hear people say, oh, you just need to do Kegels or whatever, which is all about tightening. But in order to push a baby out properly and use the right muscles, you have to learn how to relax and lengthen, which I'm so glad, again, that I knew this. So I actually, with my daughter, I started pelvic floor therapy when I was 20 weeks pregnant because I'm like, I don't know if I'm using the right muscles. I don't, and it was really, really good. And I'm doing it again, just also because I've had other issues and people don't realize how connected it is to your core, to your back, to everything. So that's awesome that you incorporate that in.
It's I think one of my favorite things is watching women come, like hire me as a doula, expecting just like emotional support or maybe childbirth education. And then like having this like awesome aha moment when they can like do a Kegel correctly for the first time in their life. Mm-hmm. Right. And like, they start to not be so afraid to talk about their anatomy and like they get really curious and it opens the door for women to just like really take ownership of our bodies and childbirth is, like in certain hospital settings, especially can feel really maybe violating or vulnerable. And so when you have the right language and sensations to like really connect with yourself, on a physical level, it can be really empowering.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So I'd love for you to talk about, because you just recently had a baby and we love birth stories on here, and kind of knowing all of this information, as a doula going into your birth and then your birthing experience.
Yeah. So I'll start, years and years ago. I believe it was 2015, I had a uterine fibroid removed. So I had a myomectomy. I had already had a cesarean style scar, and my uterus had been operated on. So when I got pregnant with Reese, my son, in 2018, my doctor essentially told me like, you'll have a C-section. That's the way this goes. And I didn't really know any better. I was in a doula at the time, and I just figured that was how this was done. So I basically went my entire pregnancy with my son, anticipating a C-section, which I had at 37 weeks, 3 days. Very fine experience. Like I didn't miss anything because I wasn't expecting anything else. I already kind of knew what a recovery would look like because of the myomectomy, and the team was phenomenal. They took great care of me. My son was in the NICU for a day, just for some breathing struggles, and he was so well taken care of. I went on to get pregnant with Betty, and while I was pregnant, by this time I had already become a doula and had started learning so much more about VBACs and the safety and the rates of success of VBACs. And I was like, I think I would have been a great candidate to have a vaginal birth, And so already I was kind of like, I feel like I was misled and not given a full truth, right? By my doctor. And I started listening to podcasts. I listened to, she's been featured on a couple podcasts, but, her Instagram handle is Within Her Birth Services, and Mabel had a myomectomy as well. Hers was laparoscopic, and she went on a few podcasts and talked about how well she advocated for herself and was able to have a few vaginal deliveries. And that really gave me so much hope. And I started following her on Instagram. I started really investing in my education around myomectomies and successful VBACs. I hired a doula. I started like really asking uncomfortable questions to my provider, who got a little unnerved. And I was like, this is good, right? This is what we're supposed to do. If I was my client, I'd be so proud of that client for asking uncomfortable questions and getting the answers they deserve. Right. So my doctor, my OB kind of begrudgingly okayed my decision to VBAC. And a few weeks later, I had another OB appointment. My doctor was out of town, so I met with a different OB in the practice. And we sat for about 30 minutes. She was really hesitant to agree with the VBAC for me, but we sat and we went over my post-op notes together. We pulled up research together. It was so empowering and it just felt so validating and like a respectful process. And she was like, I think you're a great candidate, you know, and like, this is awesome. We'll talk to your doctor about this. About I'm trying to think, maybe around 30 weeks, I started getting really bad pains, unexplainable pain. I would get sharp, severe pain that would take my breath away. It would happen randomly. I thought maybe I was having Braxton Hicks sometimes, and I would have to then go into non-stress tests throughout pretty much the last third of my pregnancy. It was just like plagued with this inexplainable pain and non-stress tests left and right that came up with nothing. And then my doctor called and said, you know, I spoke to the other doctor. She has no recollection of telling you you're a candidate for a VBAC. And we don't really like this plan for you. And so, you know, at this point I had hired my doula. My husband was like rallying my friends. I found this out to like, write me really encouraging notes for my VBAC to read in labor. And my mom lives across the street from us. So she's like, when you go in labor, I'm going to come over and watch the dog. You know, like everyone was getting really excited. And, long story short here, I had to really do a lot of digging deep within myself to choose the path there was no right or wrong answer. Like no one ever found anything on my non-stress tests. I went in for an ultrasound to see if I had a new fibroid even. Nothing was really coming up. And so my doctor said, you know, look, I am so sorry because I know this is not what you wanted, but I think you need to go forward with this cesarean. And it was the first time I really felt like she like really saw me and was a little bit more empathetic rather than just kind of guiding me. At one point she had said to me, you should just get the C-section, then all this will be over. So, like, yeah, the language had shifted and she was a little bit more compassionate in this last moment. And so I sat with my doula for a while. I talked to my husband. I talked to my mom. I thought on it. I prayed on it. I finally came to this point where I was like, you know what? And I didn't mention this previously, but I had miscarried last year. And it just felt like maybe my body was giving me a sign that it wasn't up to the task. And no one could make that decision for me. I had to do it on my own. And my doula gave me the space, beautiful space to do that. Her name is Molly. She's in DC. Everyone around me could have easily been like, I think you should do this. But everyone was like, you have to trust yourself and you need to think this through and make the decision that feels right for you and your baby. And that's what I did. And we moved forward with the C-section. It was not an easy decision to come to, but it felt right. I felt like I was removing my medical team, who in the beginning wasn't the most supportive and was a little wishy-washy. I felt like I was given the space to really be an advocate for myself and for my child and for my family. And I never regretted hiring my doula. Actually, it's funny because it was a little bittersweet. My final installment of my payment was due on the day that my C-section got scheduled. And my mom was like, oh, dang, that sucks. And I was like, no, she gave me so much information and insight. And again, even being a doula myself, I learned so much from her. And, the whole process, it ended the way it was going to. And my baby's here. And not that I don't ever want to minimize the experience of birth trauma for a woman. I think respecting that my journey, it took a lot of healing to come to terms with it. The But now I look at my baby and I'm like, for me personally, I'm like, she's here, and I didn't experience another loss, and that meant the world to me. And that was a long journey, but here we are.
It's amazing that you had supportive people around you, because we were touching on right before we recorded, kind of being in the birthing community, how sometimes, I guess this is maybe where the misconception comes in with some doulas, but there are some people in the birthing community that are like, birth is only natural. It's only this, like, you should have switched providers, fought back, like whatever. Instead of giving you the space, like your doula did, the people surrounding you did, to trust yourself, your body, to make the best decision for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. As a doula myself, I've had clients say, they'll interview multiple doulas, and I always encourage that, because I think at the heart of it, it is such a vulnerable, raw, and beautiful relationship that you build as a doula with your client, and vice versa. And you need to feel safe and like really just like connected to the person that you hire. But I've had clients who interviewed me say, like, I know I want an epidural. Will you still work with me? And I'm like, my job as your doula is not to judge you. It's to support you. Mm-hmm. No matter what you elect and what you decide that you want to do, my job is to support you, to educate you, to empower you, to lift you up. And, even if you came to me, and this happens a lot, and say, I want an unmedicated birth, I want to do this all natural, the phrasing that goes around. And I'm like, we plan for that, right? Through 6-8 months, however long we're working together, and you get into the labor and delivery room and you're like, nope, that's it. Get the epidural. Like, there's never a moment that my brain as your doula is going to a space of judgment. It's there to empower you, to encourage you, to make sure you know what that decision means for you and your baby, and to make sure that you feel safe and seen and loved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I love that you also talked about how vital your doula was for you, even having a planned cesarean birth. I think that there's also kind of that, like, oh yeah, if I'm getting an epidural, I don't need a doula. If I'm getting a cesarean, I don't need a doula. But there is still the education, the emotional and informational support.
Yes.
That is so important, because sometimes it's not a planned cesarean. Sometimes you think, like, I've had clients who were planning their vaginal birth and baby was breech, and, they tried to flip, didn't flip. So ended up in a scheduled cesarean. And I was so glad that I was able to still be there emotionally.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Molly and I and my husband, we spent hours formulating my birth plan. It was supposed to be an unmedicated, beautiful, dimly lit room. Instead, It was a very bright, sterile room. I mean, in a way, like, you mourn that, right? It was really painful for me the first couple weeks after I had Betty my Instagram feed is nothing but fitness and childbirth videos. It was hard for me to watch what now and previously. I mean, now I've moved beyond it. I've healed it, but it was really hard for me to watch these videos or look at photos, like birth photos of these like really beautiful vaginal births. And we all have to grieve and process that in our own time. But I have had several clients now who wound up in unexpected cesareans, and I am grateful for my experience, because I can look them in the eye. I can carve out time to walk them through what they can expect and lift them up through like that connection, right? Like it doesn't seem as taboo or less valuable right? Like, I think women just sometimes need to know that like they're seen and their experience is validated and it's real. And it's not any less challenging or athletic. I've had clients be like, well, now I'm having a C-section. I thought my vaginal birth would be like the greatest, like, thing I've ever accomplished as an athlete. And I'm like, you do realize like you're in for the long haul in a recovery here. Yeah. That's athletic. Mm-hmm. You're like, it's just, shifting the narrative and giving them a fresh perspective has been really, really awesome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's amazing. And I love too how you talked about like interviewing different doulas, because I always tell people that too. And I was working at the hospital for a couple years as a doula. And that was the one thing that I really missed, was that personal connection. I'm like, because we would have like a group meet and greet beforehand. And then basically who's ever on call gets to go in. And although like I learned a lot because I was working among the same midwives. Like, so I could ask them and be like, hey, like, why'd you do this thing? Or like, just have like good conversations with them. And it was nice going into a work environment where they were excited we were there and not like, wait, what are you doing? Are you here to do some witchcraft or what? But I really missed like my doula clients before that. Like I know them. They send me pictures of their kids now. You know what I mean? Like you develop that personal relationship and that connection. And it's just so nice to have that. And it's not like, I don't know, I guess like with anything. Yeah. You just like interview different people and it's like who you vibe with.
Yeah. Well, and I think, first of all, it's funny you say that because like my entire refrigerator is covered with like baby announcements, Christmas cards, like all of my clients' kids are all over my refrigerator now. But I mean, it's amazing the variety that's out there, right? Like I always say, like every doula brings something unique to the table too. We all have a different approach and a different personality and a different energy. And I'm never going to be like the incense bearing doula. Like some of my clients and I have like jammed out to hip hop music and childbirth. Like we're like, I'll obviously meet you where you are, but I mean, I follow doulas online and we're all so different. Yeah. And I think it's so cool because there is really something for everyone. And I think it's opening up people's minds to what a doula is and what a doula looks like, and kind of breaking down those myths or misconceptions about what we do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I definitely had to do some healing after my birth, and I thought that I had healed it until this pregnancy. And then now I'm like, cause I'm birthing somewhere else this time. And I ended up getting an epidural with Jovi, which I know, like I was talking to my midwife cause I have the same midwife. But I told her like at my last appointment, I'm like, I'm really struggling feeling like I tapped out, like feeling like I just gave up. And she's like, Liz, she's like, who knows? She's like, if you hadn't gotten epidural, who knows how, like you could have labored so much longer. And we know like as doulas, like that can be such an amazing tool. Like I've been at several births where the epidural was just what they needed to let their body relax to finish dilating. Mm-hmm. And that's like what I needed in the moment. And so I've struggled with that this pregnancy because I'm like, what if I can't do it? Because I couldn't do it last time. Like that, like telling myself that mentally thing. And it's like, okay, you did do it. like, I'm like trying to tell myself the things I would tell my clients. And I have a doula. She and I have been texting back and forth and we need to meet up, but, and it's the same doula that I had at my last birth. So I'm like, I need to like bounce some stuff off of her, but it was like awesome having that support too. Cause I mean, they knew what I wanted. And then when I changed my mind, they were like, okay, like here's, the options. Like, do you want to try IV meds first? Do you want to try this? And I'm like, no, like give me the epidural. And they're like, okay, like you just so supportive. Like I never felt like, even like my husband, I was like, are you going to do you feel like I'm like giving up if I get that epidural? He's like, babe, I've been watching you like in labor for hours. He's like, no, I'm not going to feel that way. And it is hard. It is hard to, like, the emotional things that go into however your labor pans out. And it's so great to have that team of people around you who support you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I mentioned this earlier, but I listened to your birth story on the podcast. And I mean, I think we can be our own harshest critics, right? And at the same time too, it's like this like emotional, financial, physical preparation that we put into this huge event. And inevitably, like there's a lot that needs to be healed and processed from that. And, but again, like we were talking about earlier, I think it's really validating for women to hear, doulas or birth workers go through scenarios that, are probably not ideal and still come out on the other side feeling like, you know, I felt successful on the other side of my birth because I felt like I was a part of the decision-making process. And that is something that I hope for every woman going through childbirth or birthing person going through childbirth, just feeling like you are in the driver's seat.
Right. Which is one of the statistics that they did on doulas is, you know, 20 years later, looking back on their birthing experience, and people who had a birth support person there had way fonder memories, and the way that they were made to feel. And I think that that's kind of the ultimate goal of the work that we do too, is you can have this amazing plan, but it's also important in that plan to be educated on everything. So I know, like, when people come to me, they're like, I want this unmedicated, this birth. And it's like, okay, let's look at in case of induction. Let's look at in case of cesarean, so that you're educated, you feel informed, although that's not what you're striving for. But then you don't feel like the birth is happening to you.
Exactly. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's good. And doulas hire doulas, right?
Yeah. I mean, if nothing else came out of because, you know, my doula offered to drive to the hospital, and I was like, girl, I've been through this now. Like, you don't have to come. We're okay. You get some rest. But, you know, I'm like, I made such a great connection with someone in my community and a colleague who I can now, like, even if I have a client who's experienced something, so I'm still relatively new at this job, you know? So even if I have a client who is experiencing something I don't have personal experience with professionally, I can touch base with her and bounce ideas off of her. And that's so special. I will always advocate for doula support. I mean, and even as a trainer, I hire trainers, right? Like, I love learning from other people. And I think it's also great to support other women in business. So there's that. And then I don't have to think about what I'm going to do that day.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know they did the study on, like, doulas and partners and how you look more fondly at your partner. And that is, like, one memory I do have of my birth. Like, I know my doula was there because we were literally doing, like, cartwheels. She had me in every single position. But I just remember my husband, like, being by my side the entire time, because she was the one squeezing my hips and pushing the points and, like, you know, holding my leg and doing different things. And that freed up my husband just to, like, hold my hand and be like, you can do this. You got this. Yeah. And I did learn stuff. I mean, I remember, because the hip squeezes, which I feel like is like 70% of what I do as a doula, were doing nothing for me in labor. They weren't really helping, but she did these, like, pressure points that I I didn't know about. And so like after the birth, I was like, Karishma, I'm like, what were you doing with your fingers back there? Like, it wasn't just like the sacrum. It was like these other points. And I'm like, you got to show me that, because that helped me so much. That was like the only thing that like gave me relief. But yeah, and that's like why I'm excited this time too. Cause I'm like, I know that she's going to handle all of that stuff. I don't have to worry about it. She'll tell me what positions to try out, what to do, and I can just, listen to my body and be in the experience.
Yeah. You'll be in your birth world.
Yeah. Yes, getting a little anxious, but so when I'd love to hear a little bit more about the fit stuff you said you do it, things are kind of virtual now.
Yeah. So I mean, COVID really threw a wrench in all of our lives, and the fitness industry really had to pivot and get creative. And I mean, I'm grateful for a decade's worth of group fitness experience, because I've learned how to verbally cue. When you're teaching group fitness to 60 people in a room, like, you can't be hands-on with everyone. So learning how to audibly cue to people and get a point across, it was, it's a big part of the meat of the work now. And, but it's also so special because now I have clients in Boston and California. I mean, I'm in Baltimore. I still see my clients in DC in person, not as much now postpartum, but I'll go back to them. But it's really amazing to be able to open up opportunities to work with more women, and get the education out there to them. I think all but 2 of my clients now are moms in some capacity. So I've definitely pivoted pretty much exclusively to pre and postnatal, but, it's I think like the direction of the industry for quite some time now. I mean, I know a lot of my clients are investing in home gyms, and you don't need a lot of equipment, and there's the convenience too for women who are mothers and working moms to go down into the basement instead of driving to the gym and doing the workout and then driving home. There's just something like, I think we're all like learning to live with this. And I think this is going to be around for a while.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. My husband and I were talking about how he's like, why do you even need a gym membership anymore? Because we got some equipment for home. Mm-hmm. I do miss physically going to the gym. I used to love going to the gym, and obviously there's tons more options there than what I have at home. But also it wouldn't make sense in my life right now. Like, I really don't want to find someone to watch my 1-year-old while I go to the gym. I really don't want to put her in the gym daycare while I'm working out, because I just don't want to. I don't have anything against it for people who do, but I guess we all have COVID babies, right? So it's like our kids haven't been exposed to tons. Yep. She plays with her cousins and whatever, but I'm like, oh my gosh, she's going to lick a toy and get rubella. So I don't know.
Yeah, it's a whole new world.
Right. So it makes sense to put her down for her nap and do a 20-minute workout, and then you didn't miss a beat. You're at home, you shower, whatever you do, it's so much easier to fit it in.
Yeah. And, I think a lot of people get nervous about prenatal training specifically you have to be clued into your clients. Don't get me wrong. My clients and I have fun. They become my friends. We talk, we laugh, we have a great time, but you have to have eyes on people. And I know a lot of people get nervous about virtual training, not having that element, but the technology, we have the technology now. You can observe a lot through these tiny little monitors and be able to see the nuances of the way that their core is engaging. And it's just, I'm grateful. It's not ideal, but I'm grateful that we have the option. And so when I'm working with my clients, whether they're in, again, halfway across the country, or, local, I can spread a message to women who aren't really being there's a lot of misinformation about prenatal training out there. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of poorly guided, people, because the social media is a blessing and a curse. Everyone has a platform and an outlet now. And I don't think anyone is malicious in it. I just think there's a lot of just like in birth work, there's a lot of outdated old school trains of thought, like don't elevate your heart rate above 140 BPMs. It's like, okay, but when my blood volume's doubled and I'm getting winded walking up the stairs holding my 2-year-old and my heart rate's now 140, like,
right.
You're telling me I can't go for a brisk walk? Like there's just a lot of things that we've had to debunk and to, help women again, just like get back in the driver's seat, be more empowered and really take ownership of their bodies. I'm grateful. I'm grateful for the technology now, and I can work from home with my kids.
I got pregnant when I was 10 months postpartum with this pregnancy. And I told my husband, I'm like, cause he wants like 1,000 children. I was like, I need more time between the next two. If we have more, we finally came to an agreement that we're going to take them one at a time. So, we'll see, but I'm like, I need more time because I felt like I was just starting to get a rhythm back. And I really struggled with postpartum depression. Looking back now, that's something that I've realized this pregnancy that I'm like trying to set myself up for, and I think that that's where I'm mostly nervous. I'm not as nervous about my birth. It's like that postpartum, like I went into a pretty dark place because we were like middle of pandemic. She was in the NICU. So then we were like overly cautious. Like, we had people waving through the windows and like nobody seeing us. And it was just, I think from there, trying to learn how to do anything with a new baby. Like I didn't even go to the grocery store with her until she was almost 6 months old. Yeah. I would like have my mother-in-law come over, or I'd drop her off over there and run and get groceries quick and then come home. Like, like it was we didn't do anything. And now she's at an age where she'll be 18 months when the baby's born. I'm like, I want her to have fun. Like I want her to like not just be stuck in the house. Like we are going to cocoon a little bit with the new baby, but like trying to really give myself space for mentally like recovering, but the physical too. And I just felt like I couldn't work out. Like I couldn't even get myself to like get ready for the day. Mm-hmm. And it took so long. And then I got pregnant again. I'm like, I need to. And like with my pregnancy with her, I was so active. I would take my dog on like 2 walks a day and just do little workouts. And this pregnancy, it's been much harder. And I'm like, I know like the next pregnancy, if I have another one, like I just want to feel better in my body, not like the number on the scale or anything. Like I just want to feel stronger. Like I want my legs and my arms to be stronger. I want like to lift. I enjoy lifting. I'm like, I just want to lift more and just like, just, it feels good to move my body. So, and then it gets hard. Then you're pregnant, you're tired, and you have a 1-year-old. So
yeah, my workouts when I was pregnant with Betty were chasing Reese around. Like that was it. But first of all, like I think so many women, myself included, appreciate your openness about postpartum depression. And, we're talking so much more about taboos and stigmas, whether it's eating disorder recovery, like a whole host of mental health issues exist out there, and they become really heightened, under the influence of pregnancy and postpartum hormones. And I don't think any of us want other women to feel alone in these struggles, but it takes a lot of vulnerability and courage to share our stories. But there's a fine line in eating disorder recovery too, of like finding the joy and fitness that brings you connectivity and comfort and joy in your body. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean that like your only joy is brought on by your body looking a certain way. Like those things can coexist, but I think it takes like really nailing down what form of movement does make you happy and does make you feel empowered and like a badass, you know, like for me, that is lifting. My barbell is like one of my babies. Like, I love it. It makes me feel really strong and capable and powerful. And that is, those are words that I never, ever would have chased after in my eating disorder. I would have chased after
thin,
small, fragile, you know? So being able to reclaim our experience with fitness, especially in postpartum, when we feel a little disconnected from ourselves and we feel isolated and lonely and like our boobs aren't even our own, like just being able to like take that back for ourselves and have that dedicated time to care for our physical and emotional well-being is really important. And I'll be here to help you after this baby if you need me.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, I think too, it's just that like making time, because even when I do have time, it's been really hard for me not to just distract myself with like things that are time sucking instead of like life giving. So
Sure.
It's like, okay, when I put Jovi down for a nap, don't sit and scroll on your phone for 15 minutes, you know, like check something off your list, feel productive, go do a little workout, like do something that's going to make you feel better and not drain you.
Absolutely. And I think one thing that can help women listening in navigating that is like, you know, first of all, I think there is also a balance in like finding that compassionate voice that encourages us and uplifts us, but also a little bit of tough love, right? Like we're all in a world that is so distracting. And being able to be like, listen, this is not serving you. Put the phone down, go work out, like without being a butthead to yourself. I don't know how this podcast is with cursing. But like, I don't want anyone to be like cruel to themselves or speak, but like, it's really hard when we get in the habit of not doing movement, right? It's so easy for that to become the habit, right? And so sometimes we do have to kind of like give a little bit of that tough love to be like, no, this is good. This is what's going to make you feel good. Go do it. Right. And even if it's 10 minutes, that's something that serves you and your body. And I think that feeds into the other point I was going to make is that we have this idea that exercise looks one way, mm-hmm. right? It's either like a SoulCycle class or a CrossFit class or running a marathon. And
you're drenched in sweat.
Yeah. And I like on so many levels, I want this message to sink into people because movement, if we can start to define exercise as movement, it takes on a whole, like there's a whole new world that opens up to ways that we can get in touch with our bodies physically, whether it's walking the dog or doing yoga or playing with the kids outside. And maybe it does look like lifting weights or going to SoulCycle. Like those are things I love too. But when we can start to classify movement as ways that we literally just get active with our physical bodies, it doesn't seem as hard to make it a part of our day. Mm-hmm. And then also, I think it's important, again, to bring this up for the women listening. You know, a lot of times women get the message from the world that when they're pregnant, they shouldn't be active. And a lot of times it is just that blanket statement. But, you know, we are creatures who need to move. Our bodies are designed to move. Our joints are designed to move a certain way. And so when we're standing up out of a chair or sitting down in a chair, we're squatting. When we're picking up our grocery bags, we can do a deadlift. When we're, you know, walking up the stairs, we're essentially doing a bunch of step ups. So there's lots of opportunity for us to be more mindful in the way that we're moving our bodies and intentional in the way we engage our muscles, that can really benefit our pregnancies and postpartum journeys. You know, a lot of people gave me crap for starting to work out 2 or 3 weeks postpartum. I was doing body weight exercises, banded exercises, but I'm like, if I have to chase my 2-year-old and my body's not prepped and primed for that activity, I'm more at risk of injury than what I'm doing right now, and doing more rehabilitation, like reconnective exercise. So I try to really work with my clients to really shift the way that they think about exercise and start to think about it more as movement.
Right. And when you know how to engage the proper muscles, that exercise is different, especially postpartum. You're not just like blindly doing something that could affect your pelvic floor because you know how to engage it. Which is good to know. And for people listening, there's so much outdated information out there, but also like make sure you get educated before.
Yes. There's so much nuance, right? Like not all of every single one of my clients is met in a different, like where they are. Right. And there's not a cookie cutter program. I like even if I wrote a program for a client, they might show up one day feeling like garbage or with like pelvic girdle pain or something. And we have to scrap what was on the menu and like pivot. And so there's a lot of nuance individually, woman to woman, like your journey is going to look very different. And that's why I put on almost every one of my posts, like your postpartum recovery is not intended to mirror mine. You know, like you have to be a critical consumer of the stuff that you see online and know that your body isn't held to the standard of someone else's, but also understand like there's a whole lot out there that's available to you, not just a bunch of fear-based misinformation.
Right. Well, and that was hard for me postpartum, was like comparing myself to people who are like, you know, who had a different recovery than I did and who are like, oh, look at me 12 weeks postpartum and my 6-pack's back. And I'm like, mine's not existent ever. So, you know, just like having that comparison can be hard, which is why that's when like the social media can be really sucking and time consuming. And you really have to, not compare yourself because everyone's experience is different. And you had mentioned way early in the podcast, hormones and breastfeeding affecting your body, which I was taught when you're younger, like, oh, how you lose the weight is you breastfeed.
Yes.
Which is not necessarily true. I mean, that worked for my sister, both my sisters. But it's not for everybody. Like I felt like you know, like, I don't know. It wasn't a thing for me.
There's so much nuance. Again, I will like preach that message forever. And yeah, like we're just, again, everything is like the messaging is all around women shrinking back to their pre-baby body. And, you know, I wonder how much of the pressure that is put on us to breastfeed is, you know, obviously there's so many benefits to baby, but there's also this underlying message to your point that like you do it and you're going to lose weight. And it's almost like people hold those two things to the same value. And like, my body is not your problem, right? Like my body's not a problem. So it has a job to do right now. And that's my priority. And yeah, like I went through the same thing with my son where, and I think too, when you are recovering or recovered or have a history of an eating disorder, that voice creeps up when you're in a vulnerable state. And, you know, there's something enticing about the weight loss element of breastfeeding. And it's the recovered side of our brains is what like allows us to circumvent that and to change the narrative. But that voice still exists that's tempted by that language. And I remember being like, wait a second, like this isn't working the way everyone said it was going to work. Like my body's holding on and storing fat because fat is needed to produce milk. And like there's layers to this stuff. And, you know, there's something to be said for breastfeeding causing uterine contractions and allowing the uterus to shrink. But there's also a whole lot of other stuff that's going on there. And woman to woman, it's going to look very different. I mean, this time around, I am weaning so much sooner than I anticipated because my breastfeeding journey has been painful physically and emotionally. Mm-hmm. And we also don't talk about the way breastfeeding and weaning, like the emotional impact of those things. Mm-hmm. It's a lot. And like, it's just like, there's so much wrapped up in, I feel like I'm like pivoting into a different direction here, but there's just a lot wrapped up in the breastfeeding culture and dialogue that I think is unfair to women. I don't think we have adequate support. I think there are too many expectations, and there's a lot of misinformation or a lack of proper education. I was so emotional weaning with my son, and I made it to 6 months of exclusively pumping with Reese, and I was so ready to be done. But like once I started the weaning process, I was just like breaking down left and right. And I think a lot of that's the external pressure, not just the hormones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, I think too, like the fear of judgment of other moms, and, you know, people who are like, oh, you're doing formula now, you know, like whatever the questions may be.
Yeah.
And that's, I mean, yeah, but it is hard. I feel like I haven't weaned Jovi yet, and I've thought about it more and more recently, for like a lot of different reasons. And it's, yeah, I'm I can't even like think about it.
I mean, I've like talking to my clients, it's hard when it's like your elective decision. And then it's also hard in a different way when like they want to wean, right? Because you're like, well, where are you going?
Yeah.
It's just hard all around. And I think we need to give women so much more credit for navigating breastfeeding. Again, whether you're nursing or pumping, I exclusively pumped with both kids. They both require a different kind of challenge and stamina. And I just think women deserve a lot more credit. And also, you know, the women who really want to and struggle. You know, I personally have had a painful oversupply, particularly with Betty. I mean, I had an oversupply with Reese, but this one's been physically, again, painful. And so, you know, there's just like, the grass isn't always greener. Mm-hmm. It's a lot. It's a lot on all of us.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, I mean, this all goes back to, like we might be birthing doulas, but the whole point is just to support people in their decisions. Yeah. And I think that that's like just the message here for moms listening, you know, that even, you know, people who think things one way and then go another, like it's fine. Like it's all about supporting each other, and that we're going to make different decisions because we're different people. We have different circumstances. We have different lives. Our kids have different personalities. They have different everything that, and also it's none of your business. Like that's part of it too, you know, like why somebody's making the decision that they are. But just being encouraging to people, whatever their decision that they're making and part of the journey that they're at, that you can encourage them, because it's not easy for anyone.
Yeah. Yep.
I would love, before we wrap up, what is your website and where can people find and follow you?
Yeah. So my website is KaitlynWozniak.com. The spelling of both of those can get confusing.
I'll put it in the show notes so you don't have to spell it out. Yeah.
Instagram, my handle is Kaitlyn Dinneh, Dinneh. Dinneh's my middle name. And yeah, that's where you can find me. I'm not on TikTok. I can't get with the TikTok thing. I admire people who are good at that stuff, but it's just not me. My website and my Instagram, that's where you can connect with me.
Awesome. Perfect. I will leave all of that in the show notes. And I just want to thank you so much for coming on, for sharing your story, for being open and just having a nice conversation with me today.
Yeah, thank you so much.
It was so great talking with Kaitlyn. Make sure you guys go and support her, follow her on Instagram. She gives out a lot of great free content. I follow a lot of birthing people in the birthing community, and it's just always fun seeing like what they're doing, what they're posting. And she offers a lot of great insight and content on her web or on her Instagram. So make sure that you go and follow her. And if you're looking for somebody to work with, definitely hit her up. All right, you guys, I'm 36 weeks and I did feel like I was much more patient with Jovi. Like when I was pregnant with Jovi, I was fine waiting. Even when I hit 40 weeks, I'm like, it's okay. She'll come when she comes. I did have a little bit of a mental shift of like, okay, but she could come any day now. But this pregnancy, I'm like, man, 4 more weeks, 5 more weeks. Like, who knows when this baby's coming? And it just seems like so far away. But then when I think about everything that we have to get done, I'm like, holy crap, take your time because we got some stuff to do. So anyways, just starting to really feel it. I think before the baby comes, we will probably have an episode talking more about our birth plans and a few other things as well. So look forward to that the beginning of March. And I love you guys. I hope you have a good week. Make sure that you are sharing the podcast, that you are leaving reviews and letting me know who you want on the podcast or what you want me to talk about. All right. Love you. Bye.
If you want to be the most interesting person at the cocktail party, well, hop on over and listen to the Brain Candy podcast.
Our award-winning content will have you laughing while you're learning.
We read all the best articles, books, and studies and keep up with new TV shows, documentaries, and pop culture. And then we cram it all into 2 shows a week.
Conspiracy theories, cannibal rabbits, unsolved mysteries, the history of the Walkman. There's something for everyone.
The Brain Candy podcast. Find our link in the show notes.
Or simply search for the Brain Candy podcast on your podcast app.